My ADHD got me fired 3 times. ADHD fam, it's Coach Ryan. Welcome back to my channel. And yes, you heard me right. I got fired 3 times because of my ADHD. And the unfortunate part is, I know a lot of you watching can relate. Not only do I want to share my story, but I also want to talk about why discrimination of those of us who are neurodivergent or have other invisible disabilities is even happening in the workplace in the first place. And the goal of this is also to help educate the leaders of organizations out there more about neurodiversity so that we can help to end the stigmas that might be happening within your own organization that you don't know about. Then we can work together to create better, more inclusive work environments and at least add some fuel to the fire for change in this movement around more inclusive workplaces for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, before I dive into the story, I want to make sure you know about my free download, 10 tips on how you can unleash your productivity at work with ADHD. There's plenty of stories from my 15 years in corporate that I could share about discrimination against those of us who are neurodivergent, but the biggest one I'll share is when I worked with a global company, has 80,000 employees across the world. Unfortunately, I worked close to their company headquarters and they still didn't know how to help and support those of us who might have unique needs when it comes to our brain wiring. One thing that worked against my ADHD was the fact it was an open office environment. Now, for many, they might actually prefer this kind of environment because it encourages collaboration. You can build rapport with your colleagues. But for me, it was really hard because there was always noise. Fortunately, I worked in a building that had a lot of open office space. So I went to my leadership team, and one of the first requests that I made was to be able to work in one of the spare offices so that I could limit the amount of visual and auditory distractions. Unfortunately, this request was denied, and the open offices were given to more senior people that were in my position. I also had a personal connection, a family connection actually, with someone in HR. And when I went to have a conversation with that person, I was talking about the challenges about getting accommodations that were reasonable. And this person told me, you're just gonna have to figure it out on your own. So that was really discouraging, especially because this is supposed to be a global healthcare leader. Thankfully, I found out that within the organization was one of the world's leading experts on ADHD. So I set up an appointment with this provider. I was really excited for that appointment. And I can remember walking in, sitting there, giving my story. And the person said to me, we all have parts of our job that we don't like. You're just gonna have to figure it out. When one of my colleagues was out on maternity leave, I also got voluntold that I would be the one in charge of submitting the monthly report, which was about 30 pages thick. I had to create a binder for each month. There was times where I had to stay till past 9 p.m. just to be able to have a distraction-free environment and gather all the data. This was something that I specifically said, this would not be a good fit for my skills. I don't think I should do this. But they pretty much didn't give me a choice. The worst offense, and the one that was the most frustrating, was when I had come up with a pretty innovative idea. Again, not even having to do necessarily with ADHD, but I excelled in giving presentations. I would be requested by various departments across the organization to come in to speak about the various advantages of working for our organization. Despite my frustrations with how things were going with my own journey, I didn't want that to take away from my fellow employees. So I still did a great job and was requested from other departments to come out to give these presentations. One of the colleagues on my team, who was actually really good and efficient on the administrative side, despised giving these presentations. So I came up with the idea, hey, what if we trade? We do some job sharing. I'll go out and do every single one of your presentations. And if you could just enter some of my administrative data for record keeping, we can call it a deal. And I remember she was so excited. And she's like, yeah, like, are you serious? That's so easy. Let's do it. So I took the approach that I was going to ask for forgiveness rather than permission, because up to this point, I'd been denied so many times. So this arrangement of job sharing, or some would call job carving, worked out extremely well until the senior leadership team found out about it. They called me into the office and said, what is this I hear about you taking over your colleagues' presentations? And I explained this concept of job sharing, and I was told by the senior director, that's not how we do it here. Please don't do that again. Just get your work done. My last attempt to get support was to actually request formal accommodations for my ADHD. Unfortunately, what this ended up doing, as it has for many others and several times throughout my career, is it sort of put a target on my back. And then from there, it paved the way out the door, because from there, it was very evident that they were building a case of why they wanted to let me go. So I've been asked, why is there still discrimination in the workplace against those of us who are neurodivergent? Is it getting any better? There have been a lot of advancements in the last 10 years when it comes to neuro-inclusion, disability, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Despite that progress that's been made, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done because discrimination is still persistent. And honestly, why I feel there's still discrimination and a lack of support for those of us who might be neurodivergent in the workplace is there's just simply a knowledge gap. It's a lack of understanding on behalf of the organizations and the leadership. And that's what leads to this confusion and frustration. So what organizations can do to help to mitigate this is to create supportive employee resource groups that can be inclusive to everyone and support those of us who are neurodivergent. And also there's a lot of experts out there, myself included, who are offering neuro-inclusion training. That's something that has become a much larger part of my business and continues to grow. So please reach out if you have any questions. But I still want to speak to you individual employees, because maybe you don't feel comfortable talking about starting an employee resource group or asking for formal training to come in. There are still some ways that you can ask for support without even having to actually disclose that you have a recognized disability. Here's my advice on how to do that. You can simply frame it as, I have found that I can be the best employee for you when ... fill in the blank. For example, when I can work with noise canceling headphones, or when I can work in an environment that reduces the amount of visual or auditory distractions. Here are some simple accommodations that would help to create a more inclusive environment for all employees, but particularly those of us who might be neurodivergent. Managers can have more frequent check-ins, maybe a weekly check-in with their employees or their direct reports, if that would help to keep people on track. Employees might also request to work fully remotely, or have a few days of the week at least that they can work remotely, because that way it's more distraction free. One very simple thing that I know I did that worked for me was facing away from visual distractions. So simply relocating or turning your desk. I did that a couple of different times and it really helped. You can also, as an employee, print out your duties as assigned to make sure that you're staying on track. You may have heard that sitting is the new smoking. It's really good for all bodies and all brains, but you can try having a standing desk, which is fairly affordable, and that can help to keep you more focused as well throughout the day. Here's something that you can do for yourself as well. If you feel like you're getting distracted and getting off task quite often, you can also create a when-then scenario. So I know one thing that I struggled with was getting sucked into checking my email all the time. And from all the clients I've spoken with and the hundreds I've worked with over the years, this is a common theme. Something that I did that helped with that is, I would say, when I finish this task, which is usually the higher priority task I would avoid, then I'll allow myself as sort of a reward to check my email. Another technique that I've picked up throughout my career is something known as a teach back. So after you teach your employees something, have them teach it back to you, just so that you can verify that they understand the concept and the steps it takes to complete the task. So to increase awareness and help to know that this is a welcoming environment, there's an acronym I've come up with that I think will help. When it comes down to it, the world and the world of work truly is neurodiverse. No single brain is the same. So just remember that we all have different perspectives and different ways of thinking of things. And this is particularly helpful for those who may not have an invisible disability, to know that all of us are equals. And equals is my acronym. E is for empathize. Have empathy for someone's perspective and educate yourself on what some of these neuro conditions might be. Q stands for question. Questions. Ask questions, have conversations with your team members. Ask them how they could best be supported. U stands for understand. Seek to understand both sides, both perspectives, from the employer side and the employee side. It's also important to understand the A, accommodations. What are some of the realistic and reasonable accommodations that can be put in place to help someone who might have different kind of brain wiring? The L in equals stands for learning styles. Personally, I'm an auditory learner and a verbal processor. So I like talking things out and hearing when someone teaches me something. So the S in equals is for stories. Everyone is on their own path and has their own story. And until you have the courage to ask about that, you won't have a truly inclusive and supportive environment. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this video helped you to learn a little bit more about what neuro-inclusion is truly about. Remember, we are all equals. Just as a quick reminder, please like, subscribe, and share this video to anyone you think might benefit from it. If you'd like a more inclusive environment for your organization, please feel free to reach out and schedule a call with me. And be sure to hit that bell icon so that you can get notified anytime I put out new content. And as a final reminder, as always, I just want to remind you that you are enough. You're worth it. You're not broken, and ADHD and invisible disabilities don't define you. They're just part of who you are. Just because you're wired a little bit differently doesn't make you less than. And lastly, I believe in you.